I think every Formula One enthusiast knows Max Verstappen jumped from Formula 3 to Formula One in 2015. Some achievement, but surely eclipsed way back in 1964 by our own Spencer Martin. Spencer vaulted straight from a Humpy Holden to a Brabham BT4. The Tasman Brabham produced 50% more power but moved half the weight. Just 2 years later, Spencer was Australian driving champion. In 1964, weeks before his 25th birthday, Spencer also became the first driver to race and win in Scuderia Veloce's immortal 250LM Ferrari, surely Australia's most famous racing car of the era. I have a personal interest here. I hitchhiked from Melbourne to Bathurst over Easter 1965 purely to see and to hear the Ferrari, Spencer at the wheel, conquer Mount Panorama. Spencer's first race was in his home-built Herald Special at the Goonblast Circuit in 1960. A little later, he progressed to a much modified Maserati 300S-like Holden-powered Prad. Then came the mighty Boomerang FX Holden, in which he won 17 races from 20 starts, beating Norm Beechey, Scuderia Veloce's star driver, along the way. Only months later, Spencer moved on to drive for the same team. In early 1966, he left David Mackay to join Bob Jane Racing, and there sneered 2 Australian Drivers' Championships. Then came his shock retirement. 25 years later, in the early 1990s, Spencer successfully returned to racing via a fabulous selection of classic historic cars, mostly Ferraris. So clearly there is a great deal to talk about, and I'm going to try and keep this in some kind of chronological order. So I'd like to start by asking you, Spencer, what it was that attracted you to motor racing?
Well, that goes back a fair way, Peter. I was apprenticed to a guy who raced an MGTC, and I used to go to Mount Druitt and help him and watch some of the guys going around. Of course, half the cars were MGs in those days. And no, it was, I got involved in helping with the preparation of the car, and on watching some of the guys go around, I thought I might have been able to keep up with some of them.
Okay, you decided not to race your MGTC, but rather you built the Herald Special in your backyard at home. It took 2 years. Why did it take so long?
Well, that happened in the backyard at Epping, and well, I was an apprentice. I think I was getting about £8 a week, and you've got to give Mum 2, and they've got 6 left to build a racing car and live. So I spent a lot of time scavenging around for bits and pieces, and it took 2 years to build, to finish it all off. And as you said, my first race was at Nublar in 1960.
Yes. So tell us about getting a competition licence 60 years ago.
I don't know what the procedure now is, but you had to go to 3 meetings and get the clerk of course to sign off that you had performed not too erratically. I mean, everybody was having a big go, but once you got your 3 signatures, you got a full licence. Everybody wanted a full licence so they could go to Bathurst. I got my 3 signatures all within about 6 or 8 months, and then on to Bathurst. So, in fact, 1960 I raced at Bathurst.
Yes. Your Prad sports car, which came next, was often referred to as the most beautiful of all Australian specials. How did that happen?
Well, long story there, Pete, but what I did was I was a panel beater, and I became fairly efficient at knocking dents out, and then I wanted to learn how to make aluminium bodies. And Stan Brown was by far the best aluminium bodybuilder. He'd worked for Rolls-Royce and for Lotus, and to work with Stan, I had to get a job with Clive Adams. And anyway, Clive and Stan, they'd built the Prad together with Jackie Pryor. And so we had that, they had that car at proved difficult. It didn't go on a straight line too good, and eventually they rolled it over and it was wrecked. And it was in the back of the workshop for a long time, and they repaired it. And then I told Clive one day that I was thinking about leaving, and he said, "Please don't. I will give you the Pratt if you stay for 12 months." So it was a handshake deal.
Yes, brilliant. At what point in your racing career did you realise that you actually had a real talent for driving?
Well, I think it was at Bathurst, at Katoomba, up at Catalina Park, when we had the Holden up there with the boys. These old buggers here. I think we broke 2 crankshafts before we got there, and we had a fair bit of trouble with the car. And so we get up to Wakefield, up to Katoomba, and within the 3rd lap I'd broken the lap record. So I thought, must be a bloody good car, you know, you're not that good.
So why was the Boomerang Holden so successful, apart from you, of course?
Well, it was a combination of the 3 blokes, Bob Gray, Joel and myself. Joel owned the car, Bob was the mechanic, and of course I was the driver, but anything Bob put together stayed together. He was the NRMA Apprentice of the Year, and just a wonderful bloke. We had a lot of fun doing that. It was enormous fun, and of course we went on to win quite a few races, as we've said.
Yes, you did. When did you become aware that David Mackay was taking an interest in your career?
Well, David, like we had the Pratt looking like $1 million. It looked really, well, you know, it was a panel beater spray paint, and I had it looking like a brand new. And David came around and congratulated me for having the car looking prepped so well. And then he called into Clive Adams one day and had a little talk to me. And so wasn't long after that, so that would have been 1963, when he asked me to drive the EH S4 Holden with Brian Muir. So that was the start of that.
So did David ever explain why he believed a young driver accustomed to an FX Holden could graduate to a Tasman Formula car?
Oh no, we never spoke about that, but I noticed in his book, I think he said that anybody who can take a car, any car, drive it to the limit, that it wouldn't matter what car they get in. I mean, it's 4 wheels and a steering wheel, and if you've got the feel to get a car to 8 or 9, 10 tenths, and you can do it with just about any car.
Yes, well, it is an extraordinary achievement to go from a humpy Holden to a Formula car. I find that unbelievable.
Oh, well, I reckon really can remember well, David was very patient, I suppose, with me. He didn't offer any advice on how to drive the car, of course, because you can't do that. I mean, it's the seat of the pants. You just got to get in it and do your best. So
he never suggested particular the way you should approach a corner, or how you brake, or what the revs you should use in the Ferrari, nothing like that?
If he's got to tell you that, you're not going to be in it, Pete.
Okay.
But no, the only person that really spoke to us was Lex Davidson. Like, we went down to Sandown Park to run with Rocky Tresize, the first time I ran with Rocky Tresize. And Lex got us to one side and he said, "Now listen here, you boys." He said, "These things are very dangerous." I said, he said, "I don't know if you know, but Fangio has never driven a car as fast as these." And I thought, geez, that sort of got my attention. But unfortunately, it was within about 18 months, both Rocky and Lex said they'd gone.
Yes.
They'd copped it, yeah.
The 250 LM lives in the memory of so many Australian enthusiasts, I'm sure most of the people in this room. What was it like to race?
It was pretty hard to put into words what a car was like to race, but first of all is the noise. It made the most unbelievable noise, which is usually like you went all the way to Bathurst just to listen to it.
You could hear it all around the circuit. You could hear it all through the gears, changing up, down, and this lovely wail and then it'd come down that long straight, sitting flat and level, and she was a great thing.
It behaved itself, straight line, like you could go down the Longford Straight or the Bathurst Straight and it sat nice. The gearbox was really great, 5-speeder, fast as you move the gear stick, you could move it as fast as you like. Yeah. I mean, the handling, well, it was a heavy car, it was an endurance car. It was a 24-hour car, so you weren't in the same race as, say, the Elfins or the Lolas and things, but we won a lot of races because of the durability of that car. The others were a little bit fragile.
Yes.
The old LLM had to go around for all day.
Yes. You raced against the world's best drivers, Jimmy Clark, Jack Brabham, Bruce McLaren, Jackie Stewart, and the others in the Tasman series. How do they rate in Spencer Martin's driver scale?
Oh, well, Jimmy was the best, and Jackie wasn't. He was there too, but these guys, they raced every weekend almost, and they raced a variety of cars. You know, those sports cars, sedan cars, and besides Formula One races. So not only did they have the equipment, they always had the best equipment, best tyres, and the latest mods on their cars, because every race meeting, cars, they find out something, and it steps up all the time. So it was good to race against those blokes because we were more or less the chopping block for them, but we learned a lot anyway.
Yes, and had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, yeah. Well, the after-race activities were sort of where the fun came in. It was pretty serious all afternoon until we got out into the beer court.
Yes, okay. Tell us about working for David and what led to your departure to Bob Jane.
How long have you got? Well, everybody knows David gave me the biggest opportunity of my life, really. But he was a very, very difficult man. I think most people knew that. He gave me the best opportunity any young bloke could ever have. And he didn't have to pay me anything to do it. He gave me a meagre wage, but like Kevin Bartlett was getting 4 times more off Alec Milton, but I didn't mind. I was doing something that I just really loved doing. And how about a young bloke getting out of a Holden and jumping into a 250 LM Ferrari, like the first rear-engine V12 Le Mans Ferrari coupe, or Berlinetta, I should say. Yeah, that was what a move. But David did all that, but he was very difficult. And so the breakup came when we were up at Lakeside. We were running the LM, and it had a bit of an oil leak which was going onto the exhaust pipe. And so he said to me after the race, I want you to go straight back to Sydney and take the motor out. And I said, well, I've just been doing 8-10 weeks of Tasman races, New Zealand, and I said, I need a week off.
And preparing the car as well as racing?
Driving and working on it. So I was the one-man band, more or less. And
working what kind of hours?
Well, all sorts of hours. I mean, there's lots of blokes here, mechanics know, you just keep going until the job's done. And I'd get into the car sometimes, quite exhausted. But anyway, and then have to pack it all up after the race. That was something, put all the stuff away. Anyway, I said to David, he said, go back to Sydney and pull the motor out. And I said, well, I'm having a week off. I'll come back in a week's time and I'll talk to you. And that was it.
What was his response to your question, your comment?
Well, I went around to 36 Burns Road to Mr. Mackay's house, and I said that I'm finished. I can't, the pressure's too much. And so he said, would I write it in, put it into a letter? I said, no. I said, I'm here telling you right here and now I'm finished. And I'm very sorry and thank you for all you've done for me. And that was it.
Archie White was the racing manager at Shell. When you told him, what was his reaction?
Well, I rang Archie straight away and I said to Arch, sorry, I moved this around. I said to Arch, I've just told David that I'm finished. He said, wow, he says, I don't know how you put up with that for so long. And he was the Shell racing manager. And he said, wherever you go, the money will go.
Yes.
So we took it down to Bob Jones.
Yes. I'm going back now a little, but you frequently ran in the Bathurst 500. You've mentioned the S4 Holden. And you even won your class in, of all things, a Vauxhall Viva. What are your memories of Bathurst in October?
You always want to bring that Vauxhall Viva up, don't you? There's no doubt about it. He had a few highs and then you kicked me in the shins with a low. And he wants to talk about the Volvo too, you know. Anyway, that was another one of David's things that we did. But no, they're all good fun. But the what we were talking about, the Vauxhall Viva, what was Bathurst itself like?
Yes.
Oh, Bathurst, well, I drove...
In a touring car, in a production car.
Scary. They have no bloody brakes. Everybody knows, like, you know, they had far too much horsepower for the brakes you have. So it's not a race of speed, it's a race of endurance. Who can keep the car together?
Yes.
I drove 2 GT Falcons there, but no, they got cars were too heavy for the amount of brake power that they had. Yeah.
Yes. And the Easter 1966 duel with Kevin Bartlett to be the first to lap Mount Panorama at 100 miles an hour. Talk about that.
Well, that was pretty crazy stuff. We did, Kevin did it first. I did it. I think I was about 4 or 5 tenths slower than him, but yeah, Kevin had a fresh motor. I'm not making excuses, but anyway, we passed and repassed one another 4 or 5 times, which was pretty hectic around Bathurst, which is a country road, and it was at least 4 or 5 times. And you know, going down the straight, we were doing 170 and side by side, which is 270 over the hump. You know, the car's completely airborne. Pretty, you know, and I couldn't realise the first time I did it, you could see so much of the nose of the car, because the nose up. I thought, this is good, and look at the wheels, and the front wheels are off the ground. I thought, yeah. I hope this thing lands square, because you had to look at the windsock as well to make sure, and
Yes.
yeah, it was sort of low flying, wasn't it?
Yes, yes. Do you now regret not taking David Mackay's advice to go to Europe and try out for Ferrari?
Oh, well, David never, ever mentioned that to me when I was driving for him.
Right.
I think he sort of, well, he batted that around a little bit after, but David was very well connected at Ferrari. I mean, he knew Michael Parks, he knew the Formula One people, and so, yeah, he had lots of connections, and most probably that could have happened, but I was very happy with what I'd done, what I'd achieved, and glad to get out in one piece.
Yes, indeed, yes. Subsequently, you raced classic cars, both in Europe, Australia and the United States. Do you have any particular memories of cars or circuits or drivers that you'd like to share with us?
Well, of course, the best car is the car you won the most races in, but and that would have to have been the 196 Dino Ferrari, which is a V6 front engine Ferrari gearbox up the front, and that was one of the most enjoyable cars. But I drove well, you know. I'm not going to tell you too much, you won't buy the book.
Well, nominate your favourite circuit that you raced on.
Oh, it'd have to be Spa in Belgium. Yeah, Spa.
Yes.
But then again, I think the most exciting historic race meeting I went to, besides Wakefield Park, would have been Monaco. Yeah, so yeah, I've been to the Wakefield Park Christmas party. It was pretty good too.
In the early 1990s, your son Matthew, who I'm pleased to say is here today, took up racing a Formula Ford, often against Mark Webber. The Martin and Webber families forged a strong friendship that eventually led to Mark living with you in Sydney. What was it about Mark's character that took him to Formula One stardom?
Well, I've got to be very careful because Mark's father's here and he's recording this. Well, no, Mark. Well, Mark was... Well, you've got to have a lot of skill to start with, and he had that in spades. He had an abundance of skill. He also was so determined. I was with him at Le Mans in 99 when the car took off.
In 1999, the German manufacturer was once again under the spotlight when its cars were involved in spectacular crashes at Le Mans. Scotland's Peter Dumbreck and Australian F1 driver Mark Webber both had miraculous escapes.
I couldn't get the front of the car back down at that speed, and I did flip and saw the sky and the ground and the sky and the ground, so it was a horrible experience, and the car was very, very good in terms of the impact. It's very, very safe, but obviously those cars were dangerous.
Oh, it's the Mark Webber car.
Yes, again.
This is amazing. This happened in the qualifying sessions. This car flipped over in qualifying when Mark Webber was at the wheel, and it looks as though exactly the same thing has happened again. So there is Mark Webber. It's Mark again.
Yes.
He was the guy in the car when it flipped last time, and it's done it again.
Mercedes said, well, you can drive... Well, besides blaming Mark for what had happened, which was pretty rude, because it was an aero problem. So then we went back to England, and we went up to Silverstone, and Eddie Jordan had cars running around, and he said, well, I can't help you, but Stoddy had cars up there, and poor Stoddy. He said, Stoddard said, if you bring your hat and stuff out, you have a try out tomorrow. So Mark got out there, and he's quicker than both their drivers, straight off the bat. And so Stoddy said, well, he can't sack his... he can only replace his number 2 driver, and he's quicker than his number 1 driver. So anyways, eventually Mark got to drive 3000s for Stoddard out of that test drive. Mercedes said, well, we can send you to Indianapolis if you like. He said, I'm not going there. Like you're counting on 20 or 30 blokes up the front doing the right thing. Only one bloke's got to come undone up the front and brings the whole field down. And they said, we can go to DMT cars. He said, I'm not doing that, I'm Formula One. Just one-eyed Formula One, that's it.
When Mark did retire from Formula One at the end of the 2014 season, he asked a small group of people who'd been important to supporting Mark in the early days to go to Austin for his second last race as his guests. Tell us about the weekend.
Well, it was a big weekend, really. Mark took, it was about 6 or 8 of us up to, we flew to Los Angeles first class, Qantas first class, and then stayed in LA for about 4 days to get over any jet lag. And then he had one of his friends take us from Los Angeles to Austin, Texas, in his private jet, which was quite an experience. We're going along, and I can remember looking, they had in the back of the seat, what speed you're doing, where's your destination, how far out, and I think we're doing about Mark 1 or Mark 1.1 or something, and if they're 36,000 feet was, sipping coffee and sandwiches, and it was a new world to me, I can tell you. And once we got to Austin, Mark took us out onto his mate's ranch, and that was another experience. And the dinner on the night time was just unbelievable what this guy had done for Mark, to mark his retirement that was coming up.
Yes. Well, Mark certainly talks about it in the book, in your book, as a really wonderful memory of his. Okay, any questions?
No, well, that's a good story too, because I was racing in, I think we were in New Zealand, and Jimmy came up to me and he said, I had a nylon shirt on, and he said, you should not have that on. If you have a fire, then the toxins in the nylon will poison you. And so he gave me 2 of his Dunlop driving suits, and they'd be the ones you're referring to. I gave them to Chaz Kelly. Chaz Kelly is a Jim Clark fan, and he lives in Tasmania, and he's put one of those suits in a glass case, and he really reveres it.
Next question.
Yes, sir. Pete Lovely. Oh no, we didn't break the rules. I'm not a rule breaker, Steve. What are you're starting this rumour, are you? Well, you're going to destroy the day, Steve, if you go on with that stuff. No, well, so Pete Lovely, well, I suppose at Laguna Seca, and yeah, that's right. Well, once again, we're in the 196, and we had that thing really jumping. It was really going well, and I got fastest time in practice, and so Steve Lovely, he came up to me and he said, Spencer, it's going to be between you and me. He said, you're a bit quick, how about slowing it off a bit? And I said, let's make a race of it. And I said, well, I don't know about that. I'll have to ask around. So I asked Bill Brown. I said, Brownie, what do you think? He wants us to back off. He said, fucking go for it. Is that what you're referring to, Steve? Sorry for the grandkids. Yes, Will?
Brian Muir in the S4 Holden. I remember him wandering into the Albus Car Club many years earlier. And then, of course, he drove to England. How was he as a driver and a guy to work with?
Perfect. Well, you couldn't get a better co-driver, a nicer bloke. We all know Muir was the best. Yeah, lovely bloke, good to be involved with, fun, everything. So sad when he passed away. A good bloke. We. Well, I mean, it was 1963. You know, no comparison. I mean, drum brakes. All that sort of thing. But we had Brucey Richard. No, we had those sintered pads. You would have had them too, I suppose, Bruce. We had the sintered bronze pads on the shoes, but they worked pretty good. The car was good, but what happened to our car was it broke a centre bolt and a spring. This is only for the technical people here. Everybody else, block your ears. So broke the centre bolt in the rear spring, and the diff housing moved back, pulled the tail shaft out of the gearbox, and that was the end of our day, so to speak. Yeah.
There is a wonderful photograph in the book of Brian pushing the car along the pit straight at Bathurst, and Spencer standing beside the car, unable to help because the rules required that it was only the driver who could push the car. It's a terrific photograph.
Yeah, that was one of the crazy rules. You had to use the wheel brace and the jack supplied by the car, and you weren't allowed to push the car. The driver was the only one allowed to push it into the pit, so that's what happened there, Pete.
The other astonishing thing is that the S4 Holden was Australia's first supercar. There were decades of supercars after the S4. And Spencer set fastest time during practice for the 1963 Armstrong 500. But that didn't mean he got pole position, because in those days, grid positions were drawn out of a hat. Can you believe that? So where did you start?
We were back in the middle of the field, but the race, it was the first time the race had moved from Phillip Island to Bathurst, and there was a Phillip Island left over that they drew the grid positions out of a hat. So it was a bit of a lottery, but I mean, in the course of the race, it doesn't make that much difference, but at least if you get a clear start, you're less chance of getting involved in an accident.
Any other questions? Yes?
Spencer, rate yourself against Frank Maddich and KB. That's a question from KB.
At the moment, I'm a very good friend of KB's, and I don't want to destroy that. Frank Maddich was on his own. He was the best. He was very good. Not only that, he was an engineer, and he was in touch with both Jack and Danny all the time. And as I said earlier, almost every weekend you'd find out something to improve the car. So Frank was right onto that all the time, and much to his credit, he not only could he drive, but he was very clever mechanically. And thanks for coming all the way down here. Oh, that's a good one. Well, you couldn't have two more opposite people than Bob Jane and David Mackay. Never forget David giving me the unbelievable opportunity, and Bob Jane giving me the opportunity to win 2 gold stars. So Bob spent plenty of money on the car. I had a very good car. There's no doubt about that. So, you know, as Mark Webber used to say, you can't win the Melbourne Cup on a donkey. And it's the same thing, you know, like Mark in a Minardi is no match for Mark in a Red Bull. So car, in my opinion, is 80%. I don't care how good anybody in the room is. If you haven't got the horse, you're not in the event.
As you were the quickest in the humpies at the time, and I was starting to build one up, and I thought, well, the way to go is to have a look at Spencer's car and try and copy what he's done at the quickest instead of starting and going in the wrong direction. So I went over to your car and I was looking over it, and you said to me, you know, started talking and said, you're building one? And I said, yeah, actually I am. He said, and you said straight away, why don't you come out to the BP service station on one night through the week? He said, we're pulling the motor out of it, and he said, I'll show you what you got to do to the motor, and you can sort out yourself where you get your parts from. And like, you don't know how much I appreciated that time for you letting me go, and you pulled the motor out. I was with you when you pulled the motor out, pulled it apart, and you said, this is what you got to do to the flywheel, you got to get the weight out of it. And I thought, Jesus, I've never seen one of them before, you know. And you said, you got to go to Wagons and get a cam, and you told me all these things. And I really appreciated that at the time. That helped me along the way. And I'd like to say thank you for back then.
Yeah. Well, you know, the motor, there weren't a lot of secrets in the motor because Merv Waggett had, you know, we were breaking cranks pretty regularly, but then Merv, we had Austin Shearline cranks on it, we had Dodge cranks on it, but Merv Waggett, he virtually engineered a Jaguar balancer on the front of, you know, as we all know. But I can't remember telling you all that, Bruce, because I certainly, if I knew how great a driver you were, I wouldn't have. You must have got me at a weak moment. Wasn't down the pub, was it?
Didn't even hesitate.
No, well, all our secrets weren't in the motor, they were elsewhere, and you couldn't see them. And everybody eventually found out what we did, but anyway.
Like even now, when we were on the next U1 after that, later on, and people come up and ask us, oh, what do you do? What springs do you run? What bars do you run? And I used to tell them the truth, and because you tell them the truth, they don't believe you. So I thought the easiest way is to just keep telling the truth.
Yeah, that's right, Bruce. Well, that's just like, we go back to driving that thing, we had that thing really set up well. It was really, my main thing was in the suspension. It was really, really great. And well, you know, everybody started. 1963, I bent the diff in the car, you know, to give it a bit of negative camber and all of that stuff, and a bit of toe in. And that came about because when I was a panel beat, a lady came in with just a standard Cortina. It was hit pretty hard in the left rear, and we've repaired it, and it went out, and 2 months later she came back, and the inside of the rear near side tyre was worn totally out. So straight away the diff spent. The diff spent. So I said, well, that's been running around for a couple of months like that. Back to the garage, pull the diff out of the Holden, and we bent it. Not the same way though.
I think I recalled you had the rear shocks, and you said for unsprung weight, you move the shocks onto the body instead of onto the diff housing or something. You move for unsprung weight. And I never heard anything about what's unsprung weight.
We better be careful, Bruce. There's a bloke yawning up the back.
I could probably ask you.
No, well, that's right, Bruce. So with the early models, they had those big cast-on shock absorbers on the diff. So I took them off the diff, mounted them on the body, and then we had the link going down into the diff housing. So we got rid of all that unsprung weight. And then we had Huismans come over and they adjusted the bump on it so that we had plenty of bump and no rebound. We wanted the inside wheel had to be on the ground all the time. So let the diff droop so that you got the weight on the inside wheel, whether left or right, all the time, and control it with a bit of sway bar and that sort of stuff. So that's what we did. There was no real secrets, but nobody picked the negative camber on the back. And when Pseudo got in the case, he said, "How long has this been going on?"
Spence?
Yeah, yes, Wayne, oh gosh.
Listen, I'd just like to reiterate what was just said about being helpful back then, and just congratulate the HSRCA on promoting you to the position you've got now. Speaking personally, just the friendship and your mentoring with me moving into something that I'm too old and too big for, and I can tell everyone here that he still is exactly the same person as he was then, and always on the phone asking what's going on, and always coming out to the track willing to help. And mate, you're a good bloke, and just like to take this opportunity to thank you for it. Bye.
Yeah, thanks, Wayne. It's been a pleasure helping you, and the same with anybody else. If I'm at the race meeting, don't hesitate to ask. That's what a patron's got to do, I was told.